Zev has been the mastermind and coordinator behind so many of the great developments in our city on a multitude of different scales. And he has been in every aspect of new construction. Zev, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So now just to kind of put a couple of your projects out there, right? We've got Pur Green. We've got Madison Carpenter. We've got the Hamptons buildings. I know there were 2 of those.
Yep.
You tend to work in a certain realm where your confidence is. And I think this really touches on the base of what you're talking about in terms of the pre-selling.
Yeah.
If I were then to twist the question, and I think I know the answer, but let's tell the consumers, why don't we see more entry-level new construction inventory?
Well, okay. So that comes back to a different aspect of the market, which is where costs have gone. So despite there not being prolific condo development in the last 15 years, the prolific apartment development has driven up the cost of land. So everybody before the pandemic or before this year thought that they owned a golden piece of property for a high-rise rental building. So if I said to them, hey, I want to do a 15-unit boutique condo, that doesn't work. I can't pay as much for that land as the guy doing a 400-unit apartment building. So all of this gets back to why are there not more entry level? Because nobody's paying $700 a square foot for a 1-bed. It hasn't existed until only one building I can think of recently in the West Loop, the Embry, where they succeeded and defied what I thought was the logic with very large, very expensive 2-bedroom product. It didn't necessarily make sense to me when I saw it brought to market, sure, but they sold out of that product. And that was million plus 2-bedroom product, which has never happened in the city before.
Well, you could say the same is true for 2550, right? When 2550 broke away, and that was right at a terrible time with regards to the housing crisis, they put numbers out there, the price per square foot that we all said, you're crazy.
Yeah. The difference is that project spanned the recession. It started pre-recession. It got caught in the recession. And I don't know if it was actually a financial success. The Embry, which is not my product, and so I'm giving a plug for somebody else, and I will give that sales team a phenomenal amount of credit. They actually have achieved something in the time allotted that they anticipated, which I think is really interesting. But that's the only time that someone's brought that product to market, which is a product type, a 2-bedroom type. But now what you're talking about, it's not the entry level. Nope. This is potentially an empty nester. So for me to bring a 800 square foot 1-bed to market for $600,000 or $700,000, I don't know that anyone's buying that. Like that, sure, that buyer isn't out there.
It's a smaller market for certain.
I think it's a zero market is my concern. Certainly it's not a market of scale. And so the purpose of doing a big building with a lot of small units is scale. Well, when there's no pool for scale, the economics don't work.
No, and I think that that's a great point. And I think that that is a huge discussion point in the sense that this is your business. The decisions have to be profitable, or at least the hope is that they're profitable, and that some of the decisions, even the ones that might help the market, aren't going to necessarily keep you in the business that you want to be in.
Correct. And Pur Green is a really interesting project when and I bring it up for a reason. When we started that building, the building had 2 sides. One side faced west towards Mary Broadway Park. We had single floor, 4,000 square foot units that were very expensive. And the other side of the building was the first 4 beds, more tightly designed spaces, 2,000 plus square foot, 4 beds that we thought would fly off the market, and they didn't. And we ended up combining 3 sets of units on the other side, the non-premier side, into gigantic units at the same price point as the premier side, and we sold them all out, which is another pivot. So this is where I sometimes pivot, and we're looking at this now. We've got a building going up now where we've seen some interest in the combination of units. So 4,000 square foot plus units at $2 million plus price point in a neighborhood that historically hasn't had that available, or there hasn't been the demand. And so this is the weirdness of this market, is that buyer profile who's looking for bigger long-term has been way more active than the first-time buyer who doesn't really exist. Unless I'm mistaken, because you're in the general broker world, they're not out there.
I disagree in the sense that I think that there's definitely a market out there for more new construction entry level, but I absolutely agree with you that with the rising costs of dirt and labor and supplies, that all of a sudden your profit margins get squished when trying to sell to that entry level.
In today in particular, interest rates.
Yep.
So you take those first two things, which already made it more expensive, which is what drives it into your $600, $700, $800 square foot price. And then you add an interest rate that's double what it was 24 months ago. It doesn't work.
Sure. No, I understand that, which is why so many of the developers that I know have said, hey, we're going to sit back. It doesn't make sense for us to build right now because there's no financial incentive. We're going to wait until the interest rates get better, the land gets a little bit, whatever the case may be, making it more profitable to them.
True.
One of the things that I've really appreciated about your work is that I know that there's sometimes two different sectors of where you're going. I love what I think you have called before your passion projects, where you're taking a little bit more of a older historical building. I feel like the current one you have going on right now is the Boniface Church. Can you talk to us a little bit more about those projects?
Yeah. So St. Boniface was a church church building that had been zoned prior to my involvement. So I grabbed the opportunity to take something on that had this super cool history. It's a church. It was already zoned, which, as we've talked about, is a difficult process in the city. So there was a natural kind of point to step into something. And then it's got this incredible setting on Eckerd Park. So you got this church that's south facing towards the city skyline, which I've learned that views matter to people a lot. And then it sits on a park. And I was like, I can make this work. So we're about 60 days away from delivering the first units there. We've just got a couple left.
I would say you're almost sold out on that one.
We are. We have 15 of 18 sold.
But then you're building another building next door.
Next door. So the property came with the site of the old parochial school, which was, again, zoned for residential. So we're doing 20 units there. We're under construction. We won't deliver for close to 12 months, towards the end of this year, I think. Those are the similar style 3 and 4 bedroom condos, but under construction already. So yeah, we take on these projects that are a little challenging, a little different. Fundamentally, more people are interested in something they don't feel is cookie cutter. So the ability to bring something that's got a little bit of a different sensibility, a different aesthetic, a different character is meaningful because everyone feels like most other stuff is fairly cookie cutter. And so
it's kind of like going into the sentiment that most people think that all new construction looks the same.
Correct. So it's really hard to differentiate yourself with new. We can only do so much. There aren't that many levers to pull. But when you get into something old or adaptive reuse or some other thing, there are a few things you can bring to life that I think, seem to resonate with
If
people.
I remember correctly, when we originally walked through the state building, when it was in a very rough condition, I believe you were saying you were trying to figure out a way to restore the staircase.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to keep that as a core component of the home.
And haven't finished it yet. But the units are getting further along. But yeah, no, it was that. We spent well in excess of $200,000 restoring just the front of the building. And there are parts and pieces to that had to be preserved. I'm not a historicist. That's not my aesthetic. If you look at my repertoire of work, most is really forward-facing, really modern. But there, you had to respect that, and you had to bring it back to life and let it be what it needed to be. And it wasn't about the last dollar. We spent $20,000. We hired this amazing guy who recarved by hand the arch over the front door. It was like an incredible experience to watch this guy on site, literally recreating the stuff.
Like a true artist in his craft.
I'm not going to get paid for that, but it was the right thing to do. And so sometimes, at least you get to a point in your career, I hope I'm there, where occasionally you can do something that's not about money. It is a little bit about passion. The church is a killer project, the most complicated thing I've ever done, but it's really interesting.
No, and that's, I will say, one of the things that I've always respected so much about you and your work is that, yes, at the end of the day, it's got to try to make sense. But I've always appreciated the fact that that part of you, it's not just the tough exterior that you put out there, but you actually are trying to put something better out there, right? There is a true commitment to that.
We spend a lot of time thinking about how people live and how the spaces function. I care a lot about space. I'm personally much better at space planning than I am about exterior. I care what things look like, but I care that they live well. And we spend a lot of time. And what kills me is most projects midstream, we end up doing a bit of a redo. we're like, this unit doesn't work. We got to redo it. And it is extraordinarily painful and expensive, but I'm willing to let the process play out because ultimately it's yielded a better result every time we've done it. It's horrible, but you have to listen to the market too. When the market says to you, this is a dog, you got to listen.